Direece Roche is exactly why one might argue a murderer should always be given a forever prison sentence, otherwise known as a whole life order. After getting out of prison for committing one murder, you see, the man went and committed another murder. Roche committed his first murder when he was 16. He and his brother Owen went round to the home of Adam Steele in Salford in Manchester, northwest England. The occasion was New Year's Day. They went round to try to find Owen's girlfriend. There'd been some struggles and tensions between Owen and his girlfriend, and when the brothers turned up to Adam Steele's flat, they demanded to know where the girl or woman was at. That caused an argument that erupted into the street, and Direece Roche, for whatever reason, got out a knife and stabbed Adam Steele to death with it. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. For that murder, Roche got a life sentence with a minimum of 12 years. His brother, meanwhile, got an indeterminate sentence for manslaughter. 8 years after Roche was sent down, his legal team tried to get him out early. They said he was a reformed character, he had an excellent prison record, and he had raised money for charity. He had cut ties with all his criminal friends, and he was planning on enrolling for a psychology degree. There's no doubt that the judges were very impressed with the progress that Roche had made in prison, but they ultimately refused him early release because they just weren't convinced that he was fully reformed, fully rehabilitated. And we can see now that their scepticism was fully justified. For instance, on day release from HMP Kirkham in Lancashire in May 2023, Roche was found with a lock knife in his bag. He denied knowing anything about it, but in any case, he was released from prison that same year, September 2023. So off Roche went out of prison. Freedom was his again, although he is on licence, or rather was on licence forever, because when you get a life sentence, which you always get for murder, you do whatever your minimum term is, and then when you get out, you're on licence for the rest of your life, which means that you have to live by a strict set of rules, and if you break any of those rules, you can be sent back to prison for any length of time. Knowing that he had his licence hanging over him for the rest of his life, 9 months later, Roche went and murdered his great uncle, Fintan McDwyer. A father and a grandfather, Fintan McDwyer was 64. He lost his wife back in 2005. By the time of his murder, he was retired, and one of his favourite hobbies was taking his beloved dog Sammy for daily walks in his local park. When Direece Roche was little, he knew his great uncle. They would see each other regularly enough, but as Roche got older, his uncle, for whatever reason, fell out of his life. And another important point about Roche is that 3 years before he murdered Adam Steele, which, sorry for not saying this earlier, he did in 2011, he lost his mother. Her name was Samantha Toohey, and she committed suicide in 2008. In the note that she left behind, she said that when she was little, she was essayed by one of her uncles. Fintan McDwyer was one of her uncles, but the fact is, Samantha had 12 other uncles, and she didn't say which one it was, if it was any. Sorry, maybe she was essayed, maybe she wasn't. I personally don't know. So there was no evidence that it was Fintan McDwyer, and after Fintan's murder, the police looked into whether it could have been him, and they couldn't find any evidence to say that it was. So now we're all probably wondering, did Roche believe that that particular great uncle of his, Fintan McDwyer, was the one who had essayed his mother? And if so, was that why he decided to kill his great uncle? Just before killing his great uncle, Roche actually went to visit his mother's grave. She is buried in Southern Cemetery in Chorlton, and then just a few hours after murdering his great uncle, he went back to her grave again. On the day that Roche murdered his great uncle Fintan was home alone, except for his dog Sammy. His son Ryan, you see, had gone away to a wedding with his girlfriend. Late at night on the 29th of June 2024, Roche put on a balaclava and other dark clothing. He left his home in Longside and went on foot to the home of his great uncle. He went through people's gardens, and when he got to his great uncle's home, he tried to open a ground floor window to get in. He wasn't able to do so, but then he found a ladder in a nearby garden and he used it to climb up to his uncle's bedroom window, and he got in that way. And then in a matter of about 90 seconds, he stabbed his great uncle to death, and he stabbed him 77 times. Fintan's body was only discovered 2 days later when his son Ryan came home. Police arrested Roche in his home on the 6th of July. It was easy for them to find him because they found DNA on objects that were left near the home of Fintan McDwyer, including some blood that was smeared on a fence, because remember, he'd got into his great uncle's home by climbing through gardens of neighbouring houses. And remember, because Roche is a convicted murderer with a criminal record, his DNA was in the police database. In his police interviews, he told them that he himself, as a child, had been essayed by his great uncle Fintan McDwyer. It turns out, though, that that was the first time he had ever mentioned the matter to anybody. And he said that the reason for that was because beforehand he was too scared to talk about it. Roche also claimed that his great uncle had told him that his dog Sammy was named after his mother, Samantha Toohey. He said that that link disturbed him and that he decided that he had to steal the dog. Somehow that would stop the idea of the dog being named after his mother disturbing him. And we're all thinking, oh, you went to steal a dog, so you took a great big knife with you. Don't know how big the knife is, but you get the point. But the thing is, Roche denied that he actually owned the knife. He denied he'd carried it with him. He said rather that the knife was his great uncle's and that he had had to wrestle it away from his great uncle. That obviously implies that his great uncle was the one who attacked him. Funnily enough, the court didn't quite believe him, especially considering that Roche had stabbed his uncle 77 times. That is not self-defence. That's a furious, frenzied, ferocious act of murder. On the 19th of September 2025, he was told that he would spend the rest of his life in prison because he was given a whole life order. Reuben Higgins was only 17 when, in October 2024, he was murdered in Marston Green, Solihull in the West Midlands by 4 other teenagers. As at the time of this recording, only one of those 4 is old enough to be named, and his name is Abdurraman Summers. On the evening of the 29th of October 2024, Reuben was in Marston Green together with 3 of his friends. By coincidence, the 3 perpetrators, together with a 4th man named Mass, were also there. The 2 groups didn't know one another and they had no contact with one another until about 6:15 p.m. At 6:15 p.m, the perpetrators group approached Reuben's group and spoke to them. At first, that was all friendly, but then Mass suggested that he recognised Reuben as someone who had previously pulled a knife on him. There is no evidence to suggest that that had actually happened, and when Mass asked Reuben to go around the corner with him, Reuben refused. The man was unarmed, he didn't want any trouble, and he was backing away in an effort to avoid confrontation. Mass, however, then reached for a distinctive knife in his waistband. As he did that, the 3 perpetrators were moving forwards and 2 witnesses gave evidence that they reached for their waistbands. Reuben and his friends all fled, but went in different directions. Reuben ran a short distance up the main road and sought refuge in a shop called the Vape mini market. He was pursued, however, by Mass and by the other 3 perpetrators. Reuben sought to keep the door of the shop closed by lying down in front of it, whereupon the chasing group attacked the door in an effort to force it open. In court, the jury heard from a witness who was working in the shop, whose name is Farhan Taha. He told them that he saw 3 or 4 people punching, kicking and pushing at the door. He described the group as shouting, swearing and being very aggressive. He told the jury that they all pushed together and forced the door open, and then all 4 of those outside came in. So the door opened inwards, pushing Reuben into a corner which was partly covered by the shop CCTV. Mr Taha told the jury that Reuben was picked up off the floor and then attacked. He described seeing people making stabbing motions towards him, but didn't actually see any knives. The attack lasted no more than 10 seconds, but in that time Reuben was stabbed 4 times by at least 2 knives. Mr Taha believes that all of those that entered his shop were involved in stabbing Reuben, but a perpetrator coded COH and Abdurraman Summers weren't captured by the CCTV in circumstances where they probably would have been if they had actively been stabbing Reuben. But unluckily for them, that does not in any way reduce their liability. They've got joint liability, even if they didn't physically perform the act of stabbing and murdering Reuben. Mr Taha described one of the other perpetrators, who's coded as SER, as being the most aggressive of the attackers, and that is borne out by the CCTV, which shows the man, or the youth rather, was only a teenager, assaulting Reuben, and while he was doing so, Mass was standing behind him. Having been stabbed, Reuben fell to the floor, where he was kicked all over his body. The attacking group then fled, and the external CCTV captured COH leaving the shop at the end of the attack. The attacking group then fled, but SER returned within minutes because he realised that he had dropped his phone. He re-entered the shop and asked Mr Taha where his phone was. As he did that, Reuben was lying on the ground, obviously seriously injured. SER completely ignored Reuben, and when Mr Taha told him that he didn't know where his phone was, he just turned and walked out. One of the stabbing injuries inflicted upon Reuben went into his chest to a depth of 6 centimetres. That wound penetrated his heart, causing rapid blood loss and eventually cardiac arrest. Members of the public and then paramedics sought to assist Reuben, but it was to no avail, and Reuben was declared dead just after 7 p.m. The perpetrators were arrested over the next 8 days. Prior to his arrest, Abdurraman Summers travelled to London and unsuccessfully tried to buy a flight to Spain. He was able to buy a bus ticket to Madrid, but ultimately he didn't go, and instead he went back to Birmingham. Mass fled to Pakistan, and to this day, or rather up to and including the time of this recording, he still hasn't been caught. The 4 factors that aggravated the sentence given to SER include, firstly, that even though he didn't deliver the fatal blow to Reuben, he played a leading role in what was a group attack. Secondly, when he returned to the vape shop, he stole Reuben's phone. Thirdly, when he committed his horrendous acts against Reuben, he was on police bail. Fourthly, in December 2024, he was sentenced for an offence of theft. That was the offence for which he was on police bail when he helped kill Reuben. That offence involved him stealing a phone from a schoolboy in circumstances where one of his group was in possession of a knife. This was an offence which came close to amounting to robbery, and the victim was a child. Where COH is concerned, there were 3 aggravating factors to his sentence. Number 1, in 2023, when he was 13 or 14, he committed no fewer than 10 robberies and or attempted robberies. Altogether, there were 10 offences. He committed most of those robberies or attempted robberies together with others. He likes his group crimes, and several of those robberies or attempted robberies involved either the production or mention of a knife. On at least one occasion, he was in possession of a knife himself. Secondly, at the time of the murder, he, like SER, was on bail. And thirdly, he was subject to 2 conditional discharges and a referral order at the time when he killed or helped to kill Reuben. And there were 2 aggravating features in the sentence given to Abdurraman Summers. Firstly, he committed 6 offences of robbery and an offence of possessing a knife between 2020 and 2022. Most of those offences were committed as part of a group. Several of them involved a knife being mentioned or shown to the victim, and on one occasion he was in possession of a knife himself. He was only aged between 14 and 16 when he committed those crimes, but they nonetheless show a pattern of using weapons to threaten violence, and they make his position more serious. Secondly, he was convicted of the last of those robberies in April 2023 and sentenced to 3 years in a young offenders institution. He was out on licence following his release from that sentence, and at the time that he took part in Reuben's murder, clearly he didn't give a toss about the fact that he was on licence. At the time of Reuben's murder, Sir and Co were both 15 while Summers was 18. Sir and Co came from very chaotic and abusive backgrounds, including disrupted schooling, some child exploitation going on there. S has a really serious illness called Marfan syndrome. It affects his blood, and he's going to need lots of hospital treatment, or at least clinical treatment, while he's in custody on an ongoing basis. I'm quoting these things to show you the mitigating factors that the judge had to take into account when he sentenced the 3 perpetrators. As to what they actually got, their sentencing having come on the 15th of September 2025 at Birmingham Crown Court, S got 17 years, C got 15 years, and Summers got 19 years. These are all the minimum length of time that they have to spend in prison because they've all got life sentences. If and when they're ever released, they'll be on licence for life. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.